A 20-year elderly person living in Delhi, India, who was just recognized by the name of Maqsood, had been fixated on tigers since the time he visited the Delhi Zoo in June 2014. After Maqsood lost his employment as a doorman in mid-2014, he would visit the zoo during the evening, telling his mom and pregnant spouse that he was out searching for a job. On September 24, 2014, Maqsood was visiting one of his preferred shows at the Delhi Zoo, the White Tiger display. Maqsood was seen hanging over the mass of the walled-in area and cautioned by a watchman not to do that. When the gatekeeper wasn't looking, Maqsood fell into the tiger nook and landed 15 feet underneath in a canal. A couple of moments later, Vijay, a 7-year-old, 6-foot-long, 450-pound white tiger moved toward him. As Maqsood hunkered, either arguing or supplicating, the tiger bit his neck and hauled him to the opposite finish of the enclosure. 15 minutes in the wake of hauling the youngster away, zoo authorities had the option to draw Vijay to another territory of the nook with some meat. Sadly, it was past the point of no return for Maqsood. He kicked the bucket because of his injuries. After the passing, participation at the zoo went up, and the tiger show turned out to be particularly famous. Vijay is still at the zoo, and the staff says he isn't a man-eater. In any case, they generally watch out for him, to be safe. On July 5, 1970, 19-year-old Roger Dean Adams and 2 of his companions were drinking lager. Sooner or later, they concluded that it would be a brilliant time to visit the Oregon Zoo. In any case, when they showed up, they were amazed to find that the zoo was closed. Undeterred, the 3 companions broke into the zoo and began meandering around. Initially, they visited the penguin show where they hopped the rail. Once inside the fenced-in area, Adams got one of the littler penguins and tossed it in the pool. Feeling somewhat more valiant, Adams and his companions proceeded onward to the indoor walled-in area. Adams climbed the divider, at that point let himself down and kicked a bear 2 or multiple times in the head. He at that point figured out how to scramble out of the fenced-in area uninjured. Having endured that experience, the 3 youngsters proceeded onward to the lion nook, where Adams climbed the divider and brought down himself into the enclosure. While clinging to the mass of the walled-in area, Adams kicked a 11-year-old lioness named Sis in the head. Sister hopped up and maneuvered Adams into the confine as he attempted to climb out. Adams' companions attempted to frighten her off by tossing rocks and containers, yet in the end, they needed to call for help. The police showed up, and they needed to shoot Sis and a 15-year-old male lion named Caesar. Roger Dean Adams was dead when the police executed the lions. When the leader of the zoo was asked by a paper correspondent what he thought of the episode, he said that his statement would be unprintable. He called attention to that the lions were actually where they ought to have been.
It was New Year's Day, 1996, and Prakash Tiwari and Suresh Rai, both in their 20s, had gone through piece of the day drinking in Calcutta, India. For some obscure explanation, they imagined that the festival required a visit to the tiger display at the Calcutta Zoo. With a gold laurel close by, they moved into the tiger show and crossed the display's canal. That is the point at which they encountered a 13-year-old Bengal tiger named Shiva. Rai tossed the laurel around Shiva's neck. Shiva didn't warmly embrace this, and she jumped on Rai. To spare his companion, Tiwari kicked the tiger in the face, so Shiva directed her concentration toward him. People at the zoo saw the uproar and found support. Authorities had the option to save Rai, however Tiwari kicked the bucket because of the assault. On December 19, 2007, 50-year-old Jai Prakash Bezbarua was visiting the Assam State Zoo in Guwahati, India, with his significant other and 2 children. To get an image of 2 Bengal tigers, Bezbarua conflicted with the alerts from watches and moved more than one of the boundaries. When he was near the fenced-in area, he put his arm in the middle of the bars. Out of nowhere, 2 tigers got his arm, and afterward removed his arm before his shocked family and many other witnesses. Bezbarua was taken to the emergency clinic, yet he kicked the bucket from blood misfortune. It was soon after shutting time at the San Francisco Zoo on Christmas Day, 2007. 17-year-old Carlos Eduardo Sousa Jr. Furthermore, his two companions who were siblings, 19-year-old Paul Dhaliwal and 23-year-old Kulbir Dhaliwal, had gone through the evening at the zoo. As they were exiting, they passed by the tiger grotto. It is accepted that the three youngsters insulted a 4-year-old Siberian tiger named Tatiana. The 450-pound tiger leapt out of the cavern and got the highest point of the 12.5-foot divider, which was underneath government guidelines. She had the option to pull herself up and out of the fenced-in area. The tiger arrived on the blacktop and assaulted Paul. Carlos and Kulbir attempted to stand out enough to be noticed, and when they did, the tiger jumped on Carlos. The Dhaliwal siblings raced to a close-by zoo bistro and began hollering for help. After murdering Carlos, the tiger followed the path of blood left by Paul. She followed him from around 300 yards. When Tatiana discovered Paul, he was with Kulbir, and Tatiana began battering Kulbir. The police showed up on the scene in the blink of an eye a short time later, and they had to kill Tatiana. Both Paul and Kulbir Dhaliwal endured the assault.
On September 3, 1977, 6-year-old David Mark Wasson and his dad were visiting the Miami Serpentarium. David and his dad visited the crocodile pit. David was set on the mass of the Nook, so he and his dad could toss ocean grapes to the crocodiles. When his dad pivoted to get more ocean grapes, David fell into the pit. A gatekeeper who saw the mishap said that Cookie, a 12-foot African crocodile, responded in a flash. From 10 feet away, he lurched at David and caught his jaws around the kid's chest. Treat began shaking David and struck his head against the wall. Another man bounced into the pit to spare David. The man figured out how to get David, however Cookie, despite everything, had a hang on David. The man was hauled towards the crocodile-filled water as Cookie conveyed David into the water, so he needed to let go. Once in the water, the crocodile held the kid's body submerged for 5 or 6 minutes. He just let go of the body after he was jabbed in the eye. David was articulated dead while in transit to the hospital. The proprietor of the Serpentarium was noticeably shaken by the disaster. He shot Cookie multiple times, and it took an hour for the crocodile to kick the bucket. On May 19, 1987, 11-year-old Juan Perez and 2 of his companions were visiting the Prospect Park Zoo in Brooklyn, New York. After the zoo had shut for the day. At about 7 p.m., the companions began challenging each other to swim in a portion of the creature's enclosures. First, they took a dip in the channel in the seal display. However, when that wasn't sufficiently brave, the 3 young men chose to take a dip in the polar bear cage. The 3 young men stripped, yet 2 of them began to retreat. Attempting to compel his companions into the confine, Juan tossed their garments into the channel. This clamor animated the 2 polar bears, a male and a female, that were both more than 8 feet tall and weighed more than 900 pounds. When Juan slipped into the water, the polar bears moved toward him. In any case, rather than moving out, Perez incited the female bear. This prompted the male gnawing him on his shoulder and hauling him away. As Juan was being hauled away, he shouted to his companions, "Go find support. They're gnawing me hard." Juan's 2 companions shouted for help and afterward hid. The police showed up a few minutes after the fact, yet it took 20 minutes for them to get the zoo opened. At the point when they showed up at the polar bear walled-in area, they saw the 2 bears battling about Juan's remains. The police were informed that there were more kids in the fenced-in area with the bears, and they could see youngsters' garments gliding in the moat. The police felt that they had no real option except to shoot the bears multiple times with a 12-check shotgun and multiple times with a gun. The 2 bears kicked the bucket because of their wounds. It was simply after the bears were shot that the police discovered that the other 2 young men didn't go into the walled-in area.
On June 28, 1966, 3-year-old Ruth Ellen Friedman and her folks were visiting the Henry Vilas Zoo in Madison, Wisconsin. They halted to see the zoo's just elephant, a 3-ton 23-year-old Asian elephant named Winky. Winky had been at the zoo for a long time and was viewed as quiet. He was a most loved among the youngsters since they could take care of him peanuts and popcorn. Wanting to take care of him on that pivotal day, Ruth dodged under a watchman rail and drew near to the confine. At that point Winky accomplished something bizarre. He connected and folded his trunk over Ruth. Ruth's mom shouted, and Winky crushed the young lady against the bars, thumping her oblivious. Winky got Ruth again and dropped her. At that point Winky carried Ruth's body into the confine and trampled her repeatedly. Both of Ruth's folks attempted to get into the enclosure to spare her, however they couldn't. At the point when the guardian ventured into the enclosure, Winky halted his assault, and the overseer pulled the 3-year-old's body out of the cage. After the passing, Winky was sent to a reproducing ranch. One of his posterity, likewise named Winky, has been named a hazardous creature since he executed a female handler, and harmed a few different handlers and zoo guests.
In May 1958, the mother of 2.5-year-old Julia Ann Voigt brought her and her sister from their home in Chilliwack, British Columbia, to Washington, D.C. to visit her parents. May 16 was a delightful day, so the family chose to visit the National Zoo. Grandad Harry Jackson took Julia Ann to see the lions. By one way or another, she escaped from him and slipped past the guardrail. A full-developed male African lion named Passion moved toward her and snatched her leg. Jackson took swift, decisive action and attempted to snatch his granddaughter, yet the lion was excessively solid. Energy maneuvered her body into the confine and strolled around with her body in his mouth. At the point when he dropped her, a lioness named Princess destroyed the youngster, and she wound up beheading her. At seeing his granddaughter being battered, Jackson endured a minor heart attack. Julia Ann's body was recouped after animal handlers pursued the lions away with fire quenchers. The unfortunate demise sent waves through the zoo business, and new security measures were instituted as a result of it. Julia Ann's granddad, Harry Jackson, endured his cardiovascular failure. On November 4, 2012, 2-year-old Maddox Dairkosh and his folks were visiting the Painted Canine show at the Pittsburgh Zoo. Maddox was put on the railing by his mom, and he inadvertently fell in. There were well-being nets set up, however witnesses said Maddox bobbed twice and fell into the enclosure. The 11 painted canines, which are extremely regional, promptly jumped on the little youngster. Despite the fact that there were animal specialists in the prompt territory, there was nothing they could do in light of the fact that, when they reacted, it was apparent that Maddox was dead. One of the pooches must be shot since he would not leave the body alone. After the catastrophe, the zoo parted with the painted mutts. The Dairkoshes sued the Pittsburgh Zoo, and the zoo's legal counselor said that Maddox's mom was to blame for her child's passing. At last, the Dairkoshes and the Pittsburgh Zoo settled in June 2014.